All right, everyone, buckle up. We're diving headfirst into the world of cybersecurity today.
Always an adventure. Right.
Absolutely. We've got a whole stack of reports, advisories, blog posts, you name it all, about the latest and greatest cybersecurity threats.
Yeah, some pretty hair-raising stuff, actually.
Okay, so let's set the stage. What's the overall vibe we're getting from all this? What are the big takeaways?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is this shift, from individual targets to like entire organizations being in the crosshairs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And what makes it even more intense is that some of these vulnerabilities we're talking about, they're not just theoretical, they're actively being exploited right now.
Okay, that definitely adds a sense of urgency to things. So let's jump right in. This Malwarebytes report about an Apple zero-day vulnerability, this one really caught my eye.
Oh, yeah, this one's a doozy.
Yeah.
It's affecting, well, pretty much the whole Apple ecosystem.
Mhm.
iPhones, iPads, Macs, even Apple Watches and Apple TVs.
That's a lot of devices.
And what makes it a zero-day is that there's no official patch available yet.
Hmm.
So until Apple releases an update, users are basically sitting ducks.
That's unsettling. And they mentioned this flaw being a use after free bug. Can you break that down for me? I'm not exactly a tech wizard.
Sure, sure. Um, Imagine you're working on a document, right? And you
Mm.
hit delete. But then your computer, it tries to open that deleted document again.
Okay, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. It's accessing something that's no longer there and that can cause all sorts of unpredictable behavior, system crashes, you name it. And in this case, it creates a way for attackers to basically sneak in and take advantage of the chaos.
And not just sneak in, the report mentions they can elevate privileges. What does that mean in practical terms? Like, what can they actually do?
It means they can gain control over parts of your device they shouldn't have access to. Think like stealing your data, installing malware, even locking you out of your own device.
So someone could potentially be reading my emails, accessing my bank accounts, all that.
It's a scary thought, right? But it's the reality of this kind of vulnerability.
Okay, so first things first, what can our listeners do to protect themselves right now?
The most important thing is to update your devices as soon as possible.
Makes sense. But how do you do that?
Go to Settings, then General, then Software Update, and make sure you're running iOS 17.2 or later, or the latest version for your specific device.
Got it. Update, update, update.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while you're at it, turn on automatic updates. That way you don't have to remember to do it manually every time.
Okay, so that takes care of the immediate threat. But it makes you wonder, are we just constantly playing whack-a-mole with these vulnerabilities? One gets patched, another one pops up.
Right. It can definitely feel that way sometimes. And that's where this idea of security platformization comes in. We've got this report from Palo Alto Networks, and they really dive into this concept.
Platformization. Okay, I'm intrigued. What is that?
Well, think about it. The average organization, they're managing something like 83 different security solutions.
83, that's insane.
It is. And it's not just a logistical nightmare. It actually makes things less secure. You've got all these different tools, different interfaces, different alerts. It's impossible to keep track of everything effectively.
So platformization is like simplifying, consolidating.
Exactly. Instead of having all these separate tools, you bring them together into a single platform. It's like having a central command center for all your security needs.
That sounds much more manageable. But does it actually work?
Well, the study found some pretty amazing results. Organizations that adopted this platform approach, they were able to identify incidents like 72 days faster and contain them 84 days sooner than those with the more fragmented approach.
Wow, those are some serious time savings.
And not only that, they saw a way higher return on investment, 101% compared to just 28% for the non-platform approach.
Okay, so those are big numbers, but what does this mean for our listeners who, maybe aren't running a Fortune 500 company?
It's a good reminder that more isn't always better when it comes to security tools. Take a look at what you're using, see if you can streamline things, maybe find a single solution that can cover multiple needs.
So less is more, in a way.
Sometimes, yeah. It's all about finding that balance between robust protection and ease of management.
Makes sense. All right, let's shift gears a bit. We've got this advisory from CERT EU, and it talks about a vulnerability that's being actively exploited right now. This one's targeting businesses using SonicWall SMA 1000 appliances for their network security.
Yeah, this one's a bit technical, but it basically boils down to this. The appliance is accepting information without verifying if it's safe first.
So like opening a package without checking what's inside?
Exactly. And just like a package could contain something dangerous, this unverified information could contain malicious code.
The advisory mentioned a CVSS score of 9.8 out of 10. What does that mean?
The CVSS score, it's basically a way to measure how severe a vulnerability is. And 9.8, that's like almost as bad as it gets. It means that an attacker could potentially gain full control over the affected system.
Yikes. So, what can businesses do to protect themselves from this specific threat?
First and foremost, patch. SonicWall has released an update, and it's crucial to apply it ASAP.
Okay, patch the hole in the wall before someone can climb through it.
Exactly. But beyond that, it's also important to restrict access to these appliances. Make sure only trusted networks can connect. It's like adding an extra lock on the door.
Double the protection.
Right. And this vulnerability really highlights how attackers are shifting their focus. They're not just going after individuals anymore. They're targeting entire organizations, knowing that the potential damage and disruption can be much greater.
All right, let's switch gears again and talk about something that might hit a little closer to home for some of our listeners. This SANUS Internet Storm Center diary entry, it talks about a fileless Python info stealer targeting Exodus wallets.
Ooh, cryptocurrency. This is interesting.
Yeah, and it's especially sneaky because it's fileless. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. It means it operates primarily in memory, which makes it much harder to detect. Traditional antivirus software, it usually looks for files on your hard drive. But this stealer, it's like a ghost. It doesn't leave those traditional traces.
So it's almost like it's invisible?
In a way, yeah. And it targets Exodus, which is a popular crypto wallet.
Okay, so it's going after people's crypto holdings. What kind of information is it trying to steal?
It's got a few tricks up its sleeve. Clipboard monitoring, for example. It can grab passwords that you've copied from a password manager.
Oh, wow. So even password managers aren't foolproof.
Right. And then there's keylogging, where it records your keystrokes, especially when you're entering passwords.
So it's basically spying on everything you type.
Pretty much. And on top of that, it can actually steal the passphrase.json file, which holds your encrypted private keys.
Isn't that like the key to the kingdom? If someone gets that file, they have access to all your crypto, right?
You got it. So if you're using Exodus, or any crypto wallet for that matter, this is definitely something to be aware of.
So what can people do to protect themselves?
Strong, unique passwords are a must, especially for your crypto wallets. Don't rely solely on password managers for this one. Memorize the password, keep it offline, and treat it like gold.
Got it. Offline is key. All right, let's move on to our final source for this part of our deep dive.
This one comes from a Cisco Talos blog post, and it describes a whole campaign using a whole toolkit of nasty tricks. They've even got a new backdoor they call Tornet.
Sounds sophisticated.
Oh, it is. And it all starts with these phishing emails.
Yeah.
But they're not your typical "you've won $1 million" kind of scam. These are disguised as things like money transfer confirmations or order receipts.
Oh, so things that people actually expect to receive.
Exactly. They prey on that sense of familiarity. And they often use compressed attachments, those .tgz files, which can sometimes slip past security software.
Sneaking it in under the radar.
Right. And once you open that attachment, boom, you've got a whole chain of events that eventually leads to the Tornet backdoor being installed on your system.
Okay, so the backdoor is in. What happens next?
Well, this Tornet backdoor, it connects your machine to the Tor network.
Tor. That's the one known for anonymity, right?
You got it. Often used for, well, let's just say, not so legal activities. It makes it much harder to track down the attackers and see what they're doing.
So they're hiding their tracks.
Basically. And once they have that backdoor in place, they can basically do whatever they want. They can steal data, install more malware, even use your computer as part of a botnet to attack other targets.
So it's like they have a secret entrance into your system.
Exactly. And this campaign, while it's primarily targeting users in Poland and Germany right now, they've seen some English language phishing emails too.
So this could potentially affect anyone.
It's a good reminder that no one is immune to these threats.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of part 1 of our cybersecurity deep dive.
Take a deep breath, everyone. We'll be back with more in just a bit. All right, welcome back, everyone. Before we move on, I've been thinking about all those security solutions, that average of 83 that organizations are juggling.
Yeah, it's a bit mind-boggling.
And, while streamlining those tools through platformization sounds like a great idea, it makes me wonder, is technology really the be-all and end-all solution here?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the tech side of things, firewalls, antivirus software, all that. But is there more to it?
Oh, absolutely. Cybersecurity, it's not just about technology, it's about people too. Yeah, the human element plays a huge role.
Oh, you mean like user error? People accidentally clicking on phishing links, things like that?
That's definitely part of it. But he goes beyond just accidents. We're talking about social engineering attacks, where hackers manipulate people into giving up sensitive information or doing things that compromise their security.
So they're hacking our minds, not just our computers.
Exactly. They're exploiting our emotions, our trust, our desire to be helpful, and they're getting incredibly good at it.
Yeah, I have to admit, some of those phishing scams are pretty convincing these days. It's easy to see how someone could fall for them.
Absolutely. They can create websites that look almost identical to the real thing. They can mimic the tone and style of legitimate emails. They might even use personal details they've gathered about you online to make their messages seem even more believable.
So, if technology alone isn't enough, and we can't always rely on our own judgment, what can we do? How do we avoid falling into these traps?
Well, a healthy dose of skepticism is a good place to start. Question everything. Don't blindly trust emails or messages, even if they appear to be from someone you know.
So, like, verify, verify, verify.
Exactly. And never ever give out your password or other sensitive information over email or unsolicited messages. No legitimate organization will ever ask you for that.
Okay, that's good to remember. What about things like two-factor authentication? Is that helpful?
Two-factor authentication is a must-have. It's like adding an extra lock on your digital door.
Two is better than one.
Right. And let's not forget the basics. Keep your software updated. Those updates often include patches for known vulnerabilities. So running the latest versions of your operating system, your browser, your apps, it's crucial.
Okay, so vigilance, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and keeping things updated.
That's a good start. It might seem like a lot to keep track of, but it really can make a big difference in your overall security.
All right, let's dive back into our sources. This next one is a bit unexpected. Malwarebytes is warning about the risks of buying or selling secondhand iPhones with TikTok already installed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not something you'd immediately think of as a cybersecurity risk, but with TikTok being banned in the US due to, data privacy and security concerns, things get a little murky.
Right. So what's the concern with these pre-installed TikTok apps?
Well, since it's not available on official app stores anymore, people are finding other ways to install it.
Ah, so sideloading it or using third-party app stores.
Exactly. And the problem is there's no guarantee that the version of TikTok on these used phones is legitimate or safe.
So you could end up with malware or spyware disguised as TikTok.
Potentially, yeah. It's a good reminder to be cautious when buying any used device, especially when it comes to pre-installed apps. You never know what you're really getting.
So what's the advice here? What should people do if they're in the market for a used iPhone?
If you're buying, thoroughly check the device. Be wary of any apps that seem out of place. If you're selling, make sure to factory reset the device before handing it over. That'll wipe all your data and apps, including any potentially risky ones.
Good advice. All right, next up, we've got news about a massive data breach at United Health, one of the biggest health insurance companies in the U.S. This is from a Malwarebytes report.
Data breaches, unfortunately, are becoming all too common, but what caught my eye about this one is that it originated from a third-party vendor, Change Healthcare.
Ah, so it wasn't United Health that was directly attacked, but one of their partners.
Exactly. The initial breach happened almost a year ago, but they've just updated their estimate of how many people were affected, and it's huge. 190 million people.
Wow, 190 million. That's a staggering number. What kind of information was compromised?
It's a pretty wide range. Names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, even health insurance details.
That's a lot of sensitive information, the kind of stuff that could be used for identity theft.
Exactly. So what can people do if they think they might be affected by this breach?
Awareness is key. Check your credit reports, your bank statements, look for any suspicious activity. You can also consider placing a freeze on your credit, which can prevent new accounts from being opened in your name.
And what about United Health? Are they doing anything to help those affected?
They're offering credit monitoring and identity theft protection services. They're also working with law enforcement to investigate the breach.
Well, that's good to hear. It's a stark reminder that even the biggest organizations can be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is a concern for everyone, regardless of size or industry.
All right, for our final source in this part of our deep dive, let's look at a vulnerability in 7-Zip, that popular file compression software.
Oh yeah, I use 7-Zip all the time. What's the issue?
Well, it had a vulnerability, recently patched, that could have allowed attackers to bypass a Windows security feature called Mark of the Web.
Mark of the web. I'm not familiar with that one.
It's basically a warning system. When you download a file from the internet, Mark of the Web tags that file as potentially dangerous, and when you try to open it, Windows gives you a warning message.
Okay, so this vulnerability would have let attackers sneak past that warning system.
Exactly. Malicious files could be disguised as harmless downloads, making it much easier for people to unknowingly install malware.
So another reminder that vulnerabilities can pop up in the most unexpected places.
Right. So what should people do, especially if they use 7-zip?
Make sure you're running the latest version. It includes the patch for this vulnerability. And always be careful about opening files from unknown sources.
Sounds like good advice for just about everything online. Don't trust anything blindly.
Exactly. It's all connected. Every piece of software, every device, every interaction, it all presents potential vulnerabilities.
Well, on that note, maybe we should take a little break from all this cybersecurity talk. We'll be right back to wrap up our deep dive and offer some final thoughts. And we're back. Man, going through all these reports and articles, it really hits you just how much is going on in the world of cybersecurity.
It's a lot to keep up with for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that's been on my mind throughout this whole discussion is like the human factor. We can have all the best tech in the world, but if someone makes a mistake or gets tricked, it can all come crashing down.
Absolutely. The weakest link in the chain is often, well, us.
So let's talk about that a bit more. What are some of the common ways that attackers try to target people directly?
Social engineering, that's a big one. It's all about manipulating people into doing things that compromise their security.
Oh, yeah, like phishing scams, right?
Exactly. Phishing is a classic social engineering tactic. Those emails or messages disguised as something legitimate, like from your banks or a government agency, they try to create a sense of urgency, maybe even fear, to trick you into clicking on a link or downloading an attachment.
And they're getting so good at it, right? Sometimes it's really hard to tell if an email is legitimate or not.
Oh, absolutely. They're using real logos. They're mimicking the language and tone of legitimate organizations. Sometimes they even personalize the messages using information they found about you online.
So what can you do to protect yourself? It feels like you need to be like a detective or something.
Well, being skeptical is a good place to start. Question everything. Don't just blindly click on links or open attachments, even if they seem to be from someone you know. Verify, verify, verify.
Don't trust, always verify.
Something like
Yeah.
that. And if something feels even a little bit off, trust your gut. It's probably a scam.
Good advice. And what about things like strong passwords and two-factor authentication? Those seem like no-brainers.
Absolutely essential. Strong, unique passwords for every account and enable two-factor authentication whenever possible. It adds that extra layer of protection that can really make a difference.
Two is always better than one when it comes to security.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Vulnerabilities, attacks, the human element, best practices. It's a lot to process.
It is. But that's the nature of cybersecurity. It's constantly evolving. There's always something new to learn.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed, right?
Absolutely. The more you know about the threats and the tactics that attackers are using, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
And that's what this whole deep dive has been about.
Exactly.
So, to everyone listening, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. We're all in this together.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay safe out there.